Jake and I have been working on his Jeep Wrangler for literally weeks now to prep for our big Rubicon trail trip in July, and it's finally coming to the point where the suspension is finally done. The biggest part of the build, the suspension. It's basically almost done, and we couldn't be happier. It's fully welded and painted, and so far we're extremely happy with the results. Jake just has to do a few small things like fuel lines, brake lines. I think he has to still put an exhaust on it. Just small things like that, and we should be able to pull it out of the garage finally and take it out on the trail and test it out. So while Jake gets that stuff done, I finally have some time to start checking items off of the green Cherokees to do before Rubicon list. So the first thing I'm deciding to tackle on this long list is the transfer case skid plate. The transfer case is low-hanging fruit, and it's definitely one of the top items underneath of the Jeep that we don't want to have slamming against a rock on the trail. Ashley was kind enough to go grab this piece of metal for me. It's 3/16 thick, it's 1.5 by 2.5 feet wide, and this is going to be our transfer case skid plate. Now I'm going with 3/16 over 1/4 inch just so we can save a little weight on this thing. 3/16 by itself over a long wide span while flat can be a little flimsy. We found this out while building Jake's main skid plate on his Jeep. We ended up boxing it in a little, adding some bends and gussets, and there's no more bending or deflection, and it makes for a really strong skid plate. So that's the same idea I'm going to be using when building this skid plate. Right here we have our 3-piece long arm cross member, and I want to have the skid plate welded to the center section here so it can all come out as one piece when I have to service either the transfer case or the skid plate. And it's going to come up and over. We're going to put a few bends in it to the unibody, and it's going to be bolted to the unibody right here. Just so basically we're going to have multiple points where it's attached to the Jeep, so it shouldn't have an issue taking a hit from any boulder on the trail. The first step I take in a project like this is taking a ton of measurements. I have a pretty good idea of how I want to build this skid plate, so I just need to grab a few basic measurements so I can design this piece on the computer and get it cut out on the CNC. In order to get the most out of a sheet of metal, especially like this one where I bought just enough for what I needed, I square it up with the CNC so I know the edge of the sheet will be parallel with the lines to be cut. This is also a good way to maximize the material left over for use on future projects. In cases like this, I'll usually perform a dry run just to be sure that the CNC will be cutting where I want it to. This machine cuts extremely well, especially 3/16, but I'll usually take a flap disc to the piece anyway, just to be sure to clean off any sharp edges. So like I said, we're gonna make a few bends in this piece. These protrusions right here off of the main piece, we got 3 of them right here. That's what's gonna be bent in to kind of form the box. And that, like I said, is gonna give this piece its strength. And then this big protrusion right here is gonna have 2 bends in it, and that's what's gonna come up onto the unibody and bolt up to it right there. Now, I thought of an issue as this piece was getting cut out. It's kind of by the design, but I decided to continue anyway with it, because it's kind of, we can solve it pretty easily. So basically, we can get to this bend no problem. this bend right here. I got more fingers that fit into this thing, so we can kind of bend that down, no problem. And then the piece that comes up to the unibody, we can get the 2 bends in like that, no problem. The issue comes is with these side pieces right here that we need to bend in. I can't get it into the bender all the way because the side that actually comes out onto the unibody is getting in the way of the piece, because basically my bender is too small, or the press is too small. So that's an issue, but there is a way around it that I've used before in situations like this. For these 2 bends that we can't get to with the bender, we're gonna be taking this piece over back to the CNC, and we're gonna be cutting slots about every 2 inches or so, and just in a straight line right here, and then right down here as well. And then we'll be able to clamp this piece to a nice flat, straight surface. Kind of, actually the edge of my fireplace has worked really well in the past, as opposed to the wooden bench, because the bench wants to shake around and whatnot. And then we'll just take a hammer to it, beat it down until it's 90 degrees, and then we can get to welding. And then after the fact, once it's all bent into place, we'll just go back and fill in those cuts with some weld. So now I just need to figure out which bend I want to or need to bend first. And I say that because we got quite a bit of bends to bend on this piece. We have 5 bends. We got 2 right here and 3 around the outside right here. And I think I'm just gonna choose to bend the part that goes up to the unibody first. And I say that because I don't think any of the bends are gonna get in the way of each other. Say if I bent these first, they're not gonna get in the way of the bender when I go to bend the bends down here or up here. I take that back. If I bent these first, I would have a problem bending this in the bender, just because with these being folded up, I wouldn't be able to put it in the bender the right way and get the 90 degrees out of it. So with that being said, I'm gonna stick to my plan. I'm gonna start with the part that comes up to the unibody right here. I also wanna make sure that I'm bending it the right way. So this is the bottom that's gonna actually be facing the ground. So I'll just mark that so I can remember and I don't get screwed up. And I know it's the bottom just because the words are facing the right way. So if we look at it like this, with the bottom facing the ground, my first bend has to be right here, and it has to come down like this, which means it has to be pushing this way, which means I need to make my mark on this side like I had it. 2.5, 2.5. Draw a nice straight line with this. And we've got our line. Simple as that. In the past, this trick has worked out great, but then I realized the other times I used this trick was on 1/8 inch and not 3/16. The 3/16 was much too thick to bend this way, so I decided to bring it over to the bench and try another way. This is definitely not the best way to do this, but in order to keep this all one piece, this is what I decided to do. In the future, I'll definitely be investing in a larger press brake for situations like this. This thing is coming out so sick. So that is exactly how I imagined it. Look at that transfer case. Well, I don't know if you can see it that great from there, but that thing is tucked away now. It's completely hidden by this skid plate. This is coming out pretty good, I like it. Now the next step is to get this skid plate welded to the cross member right here. I think I'll probably end up taking the cross member out for that. I'll probably tack it while it's in the Jeep, and then I'll go ahead and take it out and we'll completely weld that all together. Then we'll get some bolts up in the unibody right here. And I mean, this thing seems strong already. It's gonna be crazy once it's all bolted together and welded up. So like I said, these slots that we cut with the CNC, we'll also weld those. We'll weld the corners right here. And this thing is gonna be really stout and just really solid. I'm thinking if we ever get high centered on this or anything, at least we're not getting high centered on the transfer case. That's definitely a plus, but I don't think there's gonna be any problem with this holding up or anything. So like I said, the next step is to start welding this together. But it's getting pretty late. It's already about 10:30, so I got a late start for the day today. I think I'm gonna head inside and we're gonna start welding first thing in the morning. So the first order of business this morning is to get the skid plate tacked onto the cross member of the Cherokee. I'm not gonna be fully welding it yet though, because I need to mark where the holes need to be drilled on the unibody. I'm gonna be using these threaded weld washers at the unibody. These get welded into the unibody and you're able to thread a bolt into them. These two in particular are leftover from Jake's Jeep build. We welded these onto his frame and they came out great. The unibody on the Cherokee is much thinner than the frame on the Wrangler though, so I'm hoping we're gonna be able to get the same results. This is the first one I welded in there. I had the heat turned up a bit too much for the unibody, so it's not as pretty, but still strong. Then for this one, I turned down the heat and was able to get some really nice looking welds. Overall, I'd say this is what I was expecting and this was what I was looking for. So now we can get the skid up here and start welding it onto the cross member. So I got the skid up here. It's not tacked onto the cross member yet. It's just held up by the jack and then the two bolts right here. And you can see I decided to put a spacer on this back bolt just because in between of the skid and the unibody, just because there's a curve to the unibody there. I want it to sit flat. I don't want it to sit crooked. And with this thick spacer I had, it actually sits perfectly flat, left to right and front to back. So that's really cool. add in this small triangle here for some added reinforcement. And since I stitch welded the top of the skid plate to the cross member, I added a small amount of seam sealer to prevent water intrusion. Now I very rarely will use a rattle can to paint literally anything on these Jeeps. I'll usually pull out the paint gun and use quality paint, but in this case I only have this small part to be painted, so I decided it would just be best to use a rattle can primer and gloss black instead of taking the time to pull out the paint equipment. In the near future, once the 1-tons are built and ready for paint, I'll remove this skid plate, sandblast it, and paint it with everything else with the good stuff.
Do you wanna?
Who's that?
Literally just this one bolt that needs to go in is really tough.
Mm-hmm.
So skid plate is all installed and it's looking really good. I'm pretty happy with the results. Not super happy with the rattle can paint job. You know, not in the sunlight earlier, it looked not too great. I wasn't too happy with it. But now onto the Jeep, it looks fine to me. And like I said, when we go to paint more parts, when we have more parts to paint basically, we'll probably strip this, we'll sandblast it, and we'll get it painted with some good paint. But for now, I think there's no problem here. It's just gonna be a few months or so. But this thing, this is really strong. I mean, I'm literally picking up the whole Jeep doing that.
You're picking up the whole Jeep?
Yeah.
That is impressive.
So that's pretty solid. So, I mean, it could probably get beat up, maybe dented a little bit if we hit the right rock, but I don't think it's gonna go anywhere. I think it's gonna definitely keep our transfer case safe, which is the whole idea behind it. So, pretty happy with that. Nice, quick project. So right here you can see that spacer we installed. We got the weld washers in the Jeep. They're all painted up. They look nice. Got the spacer, and we got the plate sitting nice and flat. And we don't have any problems there. That came out pretty nice. I'm pretty happy with it. Hello, ding.
So we have a long list of things that we want to get done to the Jeep before we bring on the Rubicon later this year, and that skid plate was definitely one of them.
Yep, definitely just a nice small project we were able to get done over this past day and a half or so. But I'm glad it's done, and I'm glad we're starting to make progress on this thing. We've been doing a lot of work to Jake's Wrangler. It's nice to be able to work on our own stuff again.
Yeah, and to be honest, I had absolutely no part in it. And I didn't even know Ron was going to be working on this project, but I really like it, and I like the nice, unique touches that it has for the backcountry Beagles.
Yeah,
so it's exciting.
I think it's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. We've got a few camping trips planned for the near future, so we're excited to be able to do that. We're gonna be taking the green Cherokee, maybe testing out the skid plate, hopefully not. It's kind of one of those things that you're gonna have, and hopefully you don't need to use it, I guess, but I think we'll definitely use it on the Rubicon. But.
And we have not been camping or off-roading or overlanding in a very long time, because it's just been too cold.
Yeah, so. It got to a point where we went winter camping or cold weather camping quite a bit, like weeks in a row.
It gets old really quick.
Yeah, I mean, we got the diesel heater and whatnot, but yeah, it got old quick.
But we're really excited for the warmer weather so we can do some warm weather camping.
Yeah, definitely.
We're gonna get our tan on. Yes. So we see through our analytics that most people that watch are not subscribed, so make sure to click that subscribe button.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. As always, we appreciate y'all for watching. We'll see you out on the trail, and we'll see you next time.
Lily, do you have anything to say?
Hey, don't eat that.
Anything? Banana no papa bean. Test, test, test. Banana no papa bean. Test, test, test.
Hello?
Banana no
Hello?
papa bean. Test, test, test. Can you hear me? Hello? Thank you. So we three, well, subscribe.